This circulating content that is not suitable for kids like me.
So, I had a lot of fun last week editing and putting all of the funny stuff that would normally kind of get cut out for the sake of time and putting it at the end of our episode, plus your blooper about Facebook, which cracked me up every single time I heard it. So I'm going to do that again this week.
Awesome.
So for any listeners, our music plays at the end, and if you haven't already cut it off because you're tired of hearing about our social media, then that's when you cut it off. Don't, because there's funny shit coming after that. Welcome to Crime Crazy, the weekly true crime podcast with Erin Plime
And Diana Seacon,
where we prove
that we know nothing about our legal system.
but we're still crazy for a good true crime story.
Yay.
Welcome to Crime Cozy, Diana.
Crime Cozy.
This is our third Crime Cozy episode,
It is.
which is weird because I feel like we were just sitting right here going, what are we going to call it?
And then.
And then.
And I just looked at the calendar. There are 5 Tuesdays in October, so it's extra cozy.
Excellent. So I know what I'm doing for my last one. I got that down.
Me too.
But I don't know what I'm doing for the next one.
Nope. Thought the next one was the last one.
I did too. I am both thrilled and upset with October for having an extra Tuesday.
Should we tell them what else we're going to do extra in October?
I think we should. Well, actually, it's not in October, though.
Oh, I suppose technically.
It will be November 1st.
Barely.
Well, yes, it will barely be November 1st. Actually, to tell the truth, I always publish them at 11:44 because then I only have to change the time and not the date on the schedule because I'm real lazy.
Okay.
So it technically will probably drop in October.
Yes.
Go for it.
So we are going to be doing a very special episode
Yes.
that will drop on November 1st.
Yep. Extra episode right on the wrong day of the week.
Absolutely. And I don't want to give anything away,
No.
but we are going to talk about some crime
Obviously.
is likely to happen
Yeah.
and why it's really important to go vote the next week.
Yes. This is our attempt at making our democracy better and stronger through podcasting.
Absolutely. So if you haven't figured it out yet, we're fairly liberal.
Yeah. So if you like Trump, you might want to skip this one.
I'd skip that November 1st episode if I were you.
Yeah. But I am excited about recording it. I think it's going to be a much different kind of episode.
Yep.
But I bet we can still make it pretty crazy.
Yep, absolutely.
We're pretty good at that.
We are
Mostly
pretty
'cause
good at
you're
that.
nuts.
Well, you knew what you were getting into.
It's true. Diana, did you learn anything this week?
I did.
What did you learn? Every week it's, shit, what did I learn? Wait, we can't start recording. I can't remember. Not Diana. It's always me. This week I'm like, I know what I learned.
All right, so I did learn something this week. I thought this was just fun. I was listening to an episode of No Such Thing as a Fish.
Yes, you've talked about that before.
Yeah, you should listen to it. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. It's 4 comedians that, I think they're comedians. I guess I don't actually know. It's 4 people.
I mean, are they funny
They are funny.
while they're talking?
Yes.
I think that's what a comedian is.
Okay, but I don't know that that's how they make their living.
Oh, okay.
But it's 4 people that get together. It's a British podcast, and they talk about their favorite things that they learned that week.
Uh-huh.
So one of the favorite things that they learned, I don't actually remember what it was, but it was something about the yeoman warders. The yeoman warders are the people that are in charge of guarding the Tower of London. They're called beefeaters.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That is the name by which I would recognize them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they guard the Tower of London. Their original kind of charter was to guard the crown jewels.
Okay.
Now it's more of a ceremonial role. They're the ones that give
Right.
the tours at the tower.
That everyone always makes fun of and gets in their faces and tries to make them laugh.
No.
And is obnoxious.
No, those are the guards at Buckingham Palace. Totally different.
Oh.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yep. Different kind of warder, I think. But don't quote me on that. You're thinking of the guys in the Busbies. Beefeaters are different. Beefeaters have kind of the Elizabethan style costume.
Gotcha.
And they're mainly tour guides at the Tower of London. They know the entire history. They can answer all your questions. They all live there. That's part of the deal, is they live at the Tower of London.
That's cool.
There's a bar in the Tower of London that's only for yeoman warders and their guests and families. Mm-hmm. It's actually a really cool job. One of them, of course, is the Raven Master, keeping the ravens at the Tower of London. So they were talking about kind of the history of the Beefeaters and how this all came to be. And Henry VII, who was the first of the Tudor kings, created the role of yeoman warder in 1485. But it was more of a... I don't know how to describe it. They did a really good job. It was a job that you got put into when you weren't good at anything else, but then you could sell it to somebody else when you were tired of it. And so there weren't like really good records kept.
Okay.
So in the late 1700s, they decided this shit needs to stop. They kind of reorganized everything. And that's the kind of the modern Beefeater program, if you will. And since the inception of that program, there have been about 400 Beefeaters total.
Oh, since the 1700s?
Since the late 1700s, about 400. Right now, there are, I think, 37 serving at the tower.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which means there have been more people in the world that have gone to space than have been a Beefeater.
Oh, my gosh.
There have been 536 human beings in space, but only about 400 Beefeaters.
Man. So
you're more likely to go to space than to be a yeoman warder.
Well, unless we can take in personal preference, in which case the idea of going to space terrifies me so bad.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, and I just don't even like to think about it. It just absolutely terrifies me.
I think that getting there would be problematic, but the view.
You're not attached to anything anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that. You're like, yeah, that sounds great. I'm like,
that'd
no,
be amazing.
no, never. Not a thing.
So that's what I learned.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool and fun.
I thought it was.
Mine is lighthearted too.
Excellent. So what did you learn this week?
I learned, oh God, I hope you don't know this. I learned about loofah sponges. Do you know about loofah sponges?
I know they make my feet smoother.
Uh-huh. Where do they come from?
They're sponges.
From?
Like the ocean.
No.
What?
No. They are not. I'm so excited because that's what I thought too. So it turns out loofah sponges are from a viney plant that produces gourd-like fruit. And then the fruit dries out naturally on the vine, and then you can soak it and peel away like the husk, and inside it's seeds and a loofah sponge.
No shit!
Oh my God.
God.
It's incredible. I will have to post there was a Facebook video. Oh, it was some sort of little, like a cool science things I learned or something like that.
Oh yeah, send that. I'll post it.
Because, yeah. So it turns out that these giant cucumber looking things, and it makes sense once you see a picture of them side by side. It makes sense. And now I'm like scrambling to find one so I can show it to you. Here. That is what a loofah comes from. So it looks very much like a squash, like a summer squash or a giant zucchini.
Right, kind of a browny, yellowy squash.
Yep. And when it's done growing, you know how things dry out so they can drop their seeds and whatever else.
Right.
It does. And you chop off both the ends. They soak them and then they peel away that husk. And then you have the loofah sponge. But if you look at the inside.
That's crazy. And then,
right?
And then that's where I don't understand sometimes with... I don't know if this is an achievement, but with discoveries like this, where like somebody looked at that, they dried it out, they're going to use the seeds next year, and they're like, you know, I bet I'd be extra smooth if I rubbed that on myself.
Right. Right. Well, so the video follows, it's this guy that's explaining it, and he owns like a loofah farm, essentially.
I would like to own a loofah
farm
with my new llama shirt.
Yes.
Or was that an alpaca shirt? That might have been an alpaca.
I think it was alpaca. So he apparently had always been into gardening and grew everything, and his wife brought home a gourd, and when they planted it, lo and behold, they were loofahs, and he was like, well, this is cool, and now they own like acres
Oh my gosh.
of loofahs, and it's this big viney plant that grows insanely fast. So he says he has to go out and trim all the time, or it's like 6 or 7 feet a week that it grows. But if you look at the inside of the loofah, it's like a tomato. It's totally a seed pod.
It totally is. And I've noticed that, like, when I've had a real loofah,
Yeah.
I just figured that was how it grew or was made. Or, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Right? So the other thing that he was saying is they had one that they used for washing dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's all a plant and like it naturally is able to suck all of its moisture out and create that inner part. Like they don't have to do anything like cure it or whatever else. Like they just have to take the husks off and it is that texture.
Wow.
And so it doesn't allow moisture to stay in it, and so it doesn't get moldy like a sponge would.
Right.
And so they used one that was like a dishwashing sponge for a whole year, and he's holding it up. He's like, this is what we wash dishes with. It looks just like they just picked it.
Wow.
Right? I need a loofah plant just to provide myself with loofahs. And because it's amazing.
We should do that.
So yes, not a sea sponge at all.
I had no idea. I totally thought they were a sea sponge.
I did too. And I'm so excited because I was afraid that you knew and that it was not going to be so exciting.
No, I didn't.
Because I showed David and he was like, what? Wait, what? And I even, after watching it, I was like, okay, let me just double check with a few more sources before I go out and say this in front of people. Totally a plant.
It's fantastic.
Right? All right, so now if I totally fuck up my story, at least my thing I learned was great.
That was amazing. You've won today.
Okay, good. Because I have no idea how this next part's going to go. All right, so I was trying to think again for our crime cozy about things that I might be afraid would happen. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me, where I used to live, we locked doors at night, but never when we left. And really, we didn't always lock doors at night. Like, every year we locked them more and more, but often didn't. Here, just because it's a new place, even though I think my neighborhood is probably one of the safest places ever, we lock the doors all the time. Mm-hmm. Always lock them when I'm home. We had talked about on one of the episodes about, although I don't know that it got left, the whole conversation got left in, but about like, if you're home alone, why aren't you locking the door? Blah, blah, blah. So I thought, home invasion murders. That's a scary thing. Mm-hmm. And like, it is always the thing that happens to every nice little old lady on every crime drama ever.
Well, and it's the thing that when you're trying to murder somebody, you try to make it look like a home invasion gone wrong.
Right. So I thought, well, I'm going to look this up because I've never heard of it happening to anyone. And the stories I've heard from the other side, so like Sophie's mom and her birth dad and all of their crimes that you do in order to support your drug habit kind of things. They did a lot of breaking and entering and that kind. There was never a physical part of that.
Right.
So I found a story and then I found some statistics. And my story is the Clutter family murders. Which I feel like, because it has a name like the Clutter family murders, that's kind of funny to go rob their house. It's not. But also, like, I should have known it. Like, it sounds like they've made it, but I didn't know it. So
I kind of want to imagine their house as being like one of those very spare, very
minimalist,
white, very clean.
Yes. I think you'd have to.
Or you just lean right in.
Right. Either way.
Buy every goddamn tchotchke there is, put them everywhere.
Be like, what did you expect? You knew where you were coming.
Clutter. It's in the name.
My name is not even actually Clutter. It's just the Clutter house.
Right. We actually took much like the Queen, we took our name from the home.
Right.
Not the other way around.
So the Clutter family murders, now that we've made fun of their name, they're going to die.
I feel like if they have not already died, in theory, if you're talking about them, they are indeed already dead.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, plus this was like the 50s.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't even alive yet.
Me neither. All right. So even though this story is about the Clutter family murders, it's actually going to start with Richard Eugene Hickok, And I always want to say Hitchcock, but it's not. It's Hickok, which is great. And Perry Edward Smith. And they were prison roomies.
Aww.
Right?
So cute.
So prison is like Crime U, of course. And that's exactly how they did it.
Do you get an alumni t-shirt after that?
Sort of.
Or what, like one of those license plate surrounds?
Depending on what you went in for, you can even get like a dot on a map.
Ooh.
So while they were in the prison, they heard from another prisoner about this man named Herb Clutter. They heard that he was very, very wealthy and that he had a safe in his home that contained $10,000 in cash, always full of cash. Super easy target. You know, if you ever get the chance, he'd be real easy. Okay. So they decided, yeah, that's what we're going to do. When we get out of prison, we're going to get together. We're going to break into this guy's house middle of the night and we're going to rob him. So immediately after being released from prison, they drew up all the plans and figured out how this robbery was going to go down. They went to the Clutter home, which was in Holcomb, Kansas. There were 6 people in the Clutter family, but the night that they went, there were 4 people at home. So 2 of the children were out elsewhere, and I couldn't find whether they were older and had already moved out or whether they were like spending the night at a friend's or whatever. But it's sort of, I don't know whether it's more or less tragic that 2 of them weren't home.
Yeah.
So they went into the house. They looked around. Everyone was asleep. They didn't wake anybody up right away. Like, they were very quiet, which is unusual. And we'll talk about that at the end with, like, stats and all of that. But most burglaries do not take place in the middle of the night.
Nope.
Not a thing.
Early morning.
Right. Well, and actually not even early morning.
Really?
I have a different time frame for you. Yeah. So they look around. There is no safe. And it becomes apparent really early. Like, there is no safe. It's not that it's well hidden. It's that it doesn't exist. This guy lied. So they go and they wake up Herb Clutter, the father. And he's terrified because there are these 2 criminals in his house trying to rob him. And so he gives them all the money he has on him. He's like, there's nothing else here. Like, take whatever you want. Like, I'm not going to put up a fight. I just don't have anything else. They're like, well, where's the safe? There's not a safe. There's not even an empty safe. There's no safe.
Right.
So then they go around and they wake up everybody else in the family. And they search the house again, and they confirm that actually there is no safe. No one will tell them where it is because it doesn't exist. So they go throughout the entire house, tear it apart. They find about $50, a pair of binoculars, and a transistor radio. And that is all there is to take.
Wow.
Yeah. They're very mad, and they're in a little bit of denial. And even though they didn't find the safe, and everyone in the family says there's no safe, and they've been threatening their lives, and there hasn't been a whole lot of other great stuff around. They're like, but there still must be a safe. And so they get really, really pissed, and they execute all 4 family members.
Oh.
When police get there later, Herb Clutter, who was almost 50 at the time, was on a mattress in the basement. He had been stabbed, his throat had been slashed, and he'd been shot in the head with a shotgun.
Oh my God.
He was still in his pajamas. His hands were tied. His mouth was taped. So, some torture going on. Never gave the answers they wanted. Tied him up, searched his house. Got mad. Overkill. On a couch in the next room in the basement was the 15-year-old son, who was also bound and gagged and shot in the head. In the upstairs bedrooms, all in separate bedrooms because they separated each of the family members, they found Bonnie Mae Clutter, who was the mom. She was 45. Nancy Mae Clutter, who was 16. And Mrs. Clutter was tied up and gagged. Nancy was tied up but not gagged. And both of them had also been shot in the head. The police managed to find, this was 1958, I think. But like 1950s, late 1950s. So there wasn't a ton of like forensic science going on. We're not going to test for DNA or anything like that.
We don't even know about that yet.
We don't have any clue. They did discover a bloody footprint, and they took photographs of it, and also of a tire track that they believed the murderers left. And they did determine that the bloody footprint was not from anyone in the family because they were all in their pajamas, not wearing shoes.
Yeah.
And so probably one of the murderers. Eventually it turns out to be Smith's footprint, but I don't think it really matters. So they search for quite a while for these murderers who are now on the run. So they fled to Kansas City. Hickok wrote a bunch of checks that were not able to be cashed because there was no money, because there had been no safe, and had to get out of town. So they decided they were going to go to Mexico, and they did. And they lived there for a little while. That's where they sold the radio and the binoculars for, I guess, a little tiny bit of money.
Well, I don't know. In the 50s, those would have been high-end items.
Yeah, I guess so. Not $10,000 in the safe, though.
No.
They then hitchhiked through California. They were headed to Nebraska. They eventually made it to Omaha. Then they went to Iowa, and then they went back to Kansas City. They went to Florida. They went to Nevada. They basically toured the entire,
good grief,
North America.
Yeah.
And it was not until the very last day of 1959 that anyone caught them. And the way they were caught is once the police had put together sort of all of the evidence and the shoe print and whatever else, and who could these be, Floyd Wells, who was the one. So in another article I read, they talked about Floyd Wells, and I'm pretty sure that he is the one who originally told the pair about the safe. Mm-hmm. So he ratted them out. There was at this point some reward money, and he was like, well, I'm going to get in on that. Let me tell you who you're looking for. And they found him. Now, his story didn't end well either, since he started this whole thing. He actually ended up later in a totally unrelated event being killed in an attempted prison break.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So just didn't know how to keep a low profile, did he?
No. Nobody in this is terrible. Well, I mean, they're criminals, but nobody's terribly smart. Yeah. I feel like we've covered some really intelligent criminals. These are not them.
No.
Not them. So when they were eventually caught, they had stolen a car in Iowa, and they were still driving it. Smith was still wearing the same boot that left the bloody boot print. And so, real easy to match.
Also, once a shoe has been bled on, it's dead to me.
What? Also true. Also true. So March 29th, 1960 was when they were convicted and sentenced to death. So for 5 years, they were on death row before eventually being hanged in 1965, April 14th.
Oh my God, we were still doing that?
Yup.
Oh.
Yup.
It's horrifying.
So Hickok died first at 12:41 a.m. and Smith at 1:19 a.m. Smith had some last words for everybody. He was really upset that he was being put to death.
Fair.
And I'm sad because I really agree with his last words. And I know he was a bad dude who murdered a family because they didn't have what a criminal said they had.
Yeah, don't trust.
No, but
consider the source.
But he said, I think it is a hell of a thing that life has to be taken in this manner. I say this especially because there's a great deal I could have offered society. I certainly think capital punishment is legally and morally wrong. Any apology for what I have done would be meaningless at this time. I don't have any animosities toward anyone involved in this matter. I think that is all. And then they hanged him.
I mean, the guy's right.
Right. I can't do anything to make it up. Death penalty, not cool. That's pretty much it. I mean, and I'm not pissed that you sent me to jail. I totally did these things.
Yeah.
Hickok, his only comment was, you're sending me to a better place than this. And then he added, he also didn't hold any grudge against, and actually he spoke first. So I guess really Smith said he also didn't have a grudge, but Hickok said he didn't hold any grudge against the people so the lead agent was Agent Roy Church. So specifically against Church, but also anyone who helped arrest them. And then he shook hands all around and said goodbye, and they hanged him.
Wow.
Yeah. Their final meal, in case you are wondering, was spiced shrimp, French fries, garlic bread, ice cream, and strawberries with whipped cream. And they both they ate in separate rooms. They were being hanged on the same day, but they had their own separate chaplain and their own separate last meal, although they apparently ate the same thing. Smith was not a religious man and had asked for no words to be spoken over him. Mm-hmm. But the chaplain felt like he needed to get some words in anyway. So The 23rd Psalm was read for Hickok, who was the one that was put to death first. And then Smith, the chaplain, apparently sort of under his breath said, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed is the name of the Lord. May the Lord have mercy on your soul." And then he later told other people that were standing around, or the press or somebody, that he had asked for, that Smith had specifically asked for nothing to be said over him. He's like, "Yeah, well, I kind of cheated a little bit."
Come on.
So that is one instance of, I think, probably one of the more common worst nightmares, like way I think I might die.
Right.
And I know I certainly, even after this, I probably will still feel the same way, that when it's dark and I'm in my house by myself, or it's just me and my kids, like, my heart still beats a little faster, and I still double check the doors, and I still would rather have the lights on.
Mm-hmm. Every time I am downstairs by myself at night,
yeah,
we've got blinds and in all of that, except on the kitchen door. And we don't have anything on the kitchen door because it's pretty and Jeff likes it. And when we redid the kitchen, I was going to make a curtain to cover it. And he's like, "Oh, don't do that. It's pretty." And for the most part, it doesn't bother me until I'm, downstairs eating ice cream at midnight.
Right.
And sometimes I go into the living room because nobody can see you in there.
Right. Well, so I looked up some stats, and I think you're going to feel pretty good about this. They're going to start a little scary.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to start with an interesting fact that I didn't know, because when I first went to research this, like, I decided what I wanted my topic to be before I found a crime. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, home invasion murder statistics. So it turns out home invasion is not a legal term in most states. There's no such thing as a home invasion. There is burglary, there is robbery, there is breaking and entering, but that really usually applies to public places. But just going into someone's home, not a thing.
Wouldn't it be like just trespassing?
Maybe trespassing.
Uninvited.
Right. But if you don't go and do something, like, it's just, there's no way to search the stats because they're not categorized in that way.
Gotcha. Okay.
So most of the stats that I have are kind of adjacent, but have to do with it. So, scary stat, a property crime happens every 4 seconds. However, property crimes include a lot of things that are not home invasion and certainly not violent. A burglary occurs every 20 seconds. So there are lots of burglary statistics, like 1 every 20 seconds is a burglary statistic, but those don't involve even any physical contact necessarily.
Okay.
Right? Like, if I right now say, "Give me your watch," and you feel intimidated and you give it to me, and then I give it back because it's an Apple Watch and I'm not a big fan of Apple.
Love my Apple Watch.
You have been burgled, but you have not been hurt. Right.
I've been wounded by my friend.
Well, that too. You'll never be able to trust me ever again. So, home invasions, if we were to classify anybody going into anybody else's house with the intent of doing some crime, we could say that there are probably, between 94 and 2010, an average of about 1 million a year.
Okay.
Which is significant.
It is, but there's 300 odd million people.
True. And also, only in, I think it's 3 out of every 10 cases is there even anybody in the building that's being robbed. So the thing about people who intend to rob or burgle, which is so much fun to say, and now
that
sounds
word so
meaningless.
much.
So violence is only used 7% in 7% of burglaries.
Wow.
Okay. So there's a burglary every 90 seconds, but only 7% of them there's any violence at all. Of those, guns they only even have a gun 12% of the time.
Wow.
So it's just not the case that people who are robbing houses come with any sort of plan for, if there's a person in the house, what am I going to do? Their plan is usually, I'm going to run away.
Right.
I'm going to keep my face concealed so I can't get in trouble, and I'm going to leave. Like, they don't want to add that. That's not what they're there for.
Right.
Of all of these, 65% of the 12% of the 7% of the
God.
whatever, 65% of them are people who know the person who's stealing from them. So it's not like a stranger broke into your house. It's your
druggy cousin.
Yes. Yeah. And you knew that was, they had a key or whatever else.
Right.
So they're...
I don't want to insinuate that drug users are criminals.
I know, but I think that they often go hand in hand because depending on what kind of drugs you're using, holding down a job is very challenging.
Right.
And the drugs are very addicting.
Yeah.
And at some point you run out of legal options to continue to supply your drug habit.
Right. And it does seem to be that you start at home first.
Right. Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I looked at a bunch of different statistics trying to determine like how many people got murdered in these situations. And it sounds like even just from those numbers that it has to be impossibly small.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one thing and I couldn't find it anywhere else to like corroborate it, but that said that there had been in like the past 10 years, no burglaries turned homicide.
Wow.
There have been homicides where burglary also occurred, but the homicide was either the intended thing that they went, like that was their primary focus, or it was, part of the plan, or they, it wasn't like
they got surprised.
They got
and
surprised
they
and then they
person.
killed you. Right. They injure people sometimes if they have a gun, maybe. But the interesting thing about that is that I've been watching this it's not a new series, it's new to me it's relatively new, on Netflix called I'm a Killer.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
Of course I haven't.
I know, but it's so fun. You're missing out. They have so many true crime documentaries and like sort of documentaries. This one is, they interview each episode. They go through a case of somebody on death row and they get their side of the story, which sometimes is, yeah, I did that and I don't care. And sometimes it's like, well, yeah, I was totally there and I take responsibility, but like I really don't think I deserve to be here. It's all over the map.
Yeah.
And then they interview their victims and the victims' families, and they interview other inmates, and they talk to police officers and forensic. Like they go through the whole thing and look at this story. And the premise is that even somebody that we're like 100% put him to death, send him to death row, that's done. There's always more of a story there that people don't know. And it is fascinating. Like I thought it was going to be sort of that cannibalism, gruesome, like very black and white. It's not. It's very emotional.
Yeah.
I always leave with all kinds of mixed feelings. But one of the episodes I was watching, these two kids had been doing drugs and they decided to go to a house and they were going to rob it. So what I think that what actually had happened is they were at a party doing a bunch of drugs. This one guy passed out. He was the one with all the coke. They stole a bunch of coke and I don't know if they shut it up or smoked it or what they did, but most of it was gone. He woke up. He's like, you owe me. Take this gun and go figure it out. And so they went off to rob a house. They got to where they were going, and one of the guys flipped out. I think he at least claimed that he'd always had visions and thought maybe he was the child of Satan and thought he had magical powers. And so he decided they were going to kill the inhabitants of the house because nobody was supposed to be home, but they were. So it was very literally like a burglary that turned into a murder, except for the fact that before they entered the house, they decided to murder everybody in it. So that's where I don't know how you'd corroborate that statistic,
right.
But very, 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 very unlikely that anyone will break into your house at all.
So did you happen to run across, because that got me to thinking about something that happened here a few years ago, a little bit north, where a couple of kids, teenagers, broke into a guy's house and he heard them and he went downstairs and shot them.
Yes.
And then, because he's a sadistic asshole,
Yes.
left them to die, came back downstairs.
He's a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, a boy and a girl, right?
Yep. Finished them off.
Yes.
So how many people get killed while trying to burgle? or rob a home.
So I didn't look up that statistic, although I did read that exact story because he is now on trial for murder.
About fucking time.
Yeah. So
Because they let him go.
Yeah.
They weren't going to charge him. They were doing the whole,
stand your ground.
Well, so we don't have that here.
No.
But
or
no.
the castle doctrine or whatever.
Whatever. But there was somehow recording of him going back down and finishing them off.
Right.
And this all came out immediately. It was right around Thanksgiving. One of Jeff's aunt and uncles live in the town that this all happened in, so we were hearing all about it. And yeah, like there is all of this tape, and the police like, we don't have any evidence. And everybody in the state's like,
what else?
Yeah. Like the whole state did that noise.
Yeah.
So good, about time, because it's been several years.
He is. Well, and one of the things that they are planning on bringing up as evidence is that even if there is law, like in Texas, for example, in Florida, like that whole stand your ground, like castle doctrine thing, if you come in my property, I have permission to shoot you to protect my home, that there are still exceptions to it, like laying in wait. And he violated a bunch of those in addition to like shooting people at all when you're not being threatened is not self-defense. Like,
no, I mean, I could see, again, I am not okay with guns. I am not generally okay with castle doctrines, all of that sort of thing. Like, there are some problems there. But, like, this guy heard them.
Right. If you're scared.
Right. And he certainly could have been. I don't know him. But shoot him in the kneecap, call the cops.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He shot to kill. He left them there, went and had a snack or some shit.
Right.
And then went downstairs like, oh, you're not dead? Finish them off. And I don't think called the police for hours, a day. I don't remember what it was. Like, it was all malicious. They weren't threatening you at that point. They were bleeding out in your basement.
Well, right. And if you kill somebody in self-defense or hurt somebody in like, that's a good time to call the police. If you're innocent, call the police.
Right.
These people were in my house. I thought they were going to hurt me.
I shot them in the kneecap.
I shot them. They're not dead.
Come get them.
Come get them out of my house.
Right. And I in that case, again, I'm not okay with guns. Like,
no.
There's a lot of things there I'm not okay with, but I can be like, okay, reasonable. You don't, when you see somebody in your home that's not supposed to be, this is not a rational time. You are not going to be like, excuse me, people I don't know. Are you armed? Do you mean me harm?
Right.
Like, if you are inclined to, pop a cap in somebody's ass. But if you are inclined to shoot at somebody who is invading your home.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a choice I would make, but okay. And I don't think the police would have blinked, really.
No, I think if it had ended there, except that the one article I was reading about it, and I just skimmed through it because it was not the tilt I wanted to go.
Right.
But the one article was talking about, like, there was some stuff that happened before he shot them the first time as well. It made it sound like a little bit more like baiting them or.
Yeah. No, like he's a complete piece of shit.
Yeah.
No, he's a complete piece of shit. And I'm glad he's finally getting his comeuppance. I hope he's convicted.
Right.
But yeah, no. If somebody's in your house and you want to wound them, go ahead and do that and then call the cops.
Right.
Immediately.
Right.
Not a day later or whatever it was.
Right. If they're in the house and they don't know you're there, leave the house and call the cops.
Right.
Don't get involved at all.
Right.
So, anyway. The other thing that I was going to tell you about burglaries is that or robberies, either one, home invasion robberies, generally occur during working hours. So like 10 to 3 is a very popular time for robberies because there is less likely to be someone in the home. Middle of the night, someone is in the home.
Right.
They're sleeping there. That's what they do.
Right. It's kind of what we use our houses for.
Right. So while we have this image of like the thieves are always out at night hiding in the bushes and sneaking in the shadow, they're not.
I'm pretty sure that's every ADT commercial.
Right. Right. No, it totally is. They're not. They're there when you are at work.
Well, I work from home, so haha on you people.
Well, it's true. And while they are likely to come in your house, they are likely to not be armed. And if they are armed, they're likely to not hurt you. And if they do hurt you, you probably knew them.
Yep.
So I think you're pretty safe from that one.
Rock on.
Right?
Pretty excited about that.
So, Diana, do you have a story for me?
I do have a story for you.
So ready.
So this is a story I've been thinking about covering, and then I thought about how unlikely it is, because it's very, 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 very unlikely. But I was telling you about this a little earlier. I remembered this all wrong.
Yes. Well, you've been dropping hints about this one. You tried yesterday or Wednesday to be like, I think we should lift the ban on not telling each other our stories.
I know,
so I
because
can
I
talk
want
to you about the
I
story.
want to talk about some things. We're not going to lift the ban.
No, it's not. I didn't let her, guys. I was strong.
No, but I mentioned this to a couple of people, like, oh, I'm going to talk about, do you remember when this happened? Yeah. And they all said the same thing, which is what I had thought. And then I looked into it, totally wrong.
Is it that, like, everyone thought it was one way and they later discovered it was another? Or is it like glitch in the Matrix? Like, we all thought Fruit Loops was spelled with whatever, Berenstain Bears or whatever.
It's Berenstein.
Obviously.
No, I think it is the two facts that anybody knows about this particular place, and they merged them into a story.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, now I just need to know.
Alrighty, you ready?
I'm ready.
Michael Peter Fay was born on May 30th, 1975, making him 53 days younger than me and way older than you.
Way older than me. Like ancient compared to me.
He was born in St. Louis, Missouri to Randy and George Fay, and they divorced when he was 8. As a child, he was diagnosed with ADHD, which may come into play later. After the divorce, Michael mostly lived with his father in Dayton, Ohio, but he moved to Singapore in 1992 to live with his mother and stepfather, and he attended Singapore American School.
Cool.
So a word about Singapore. Singapore is a city-state in Southeast Asia, 85 miles north of the equator. It's a former British colony, and as a former British colony, it has a legal system that's based on English common law, but it has some very substantial differences. There's no trial by jury. That was abolished in the 70s.
So you just get guilty or just the judge?
Just the judge. There is capital punishment. There's a lot of capital punishment.
Oh.
There are some very, very strict laws.
Right.
I've been to Singapore.
Yeah. Chewing gum is a law, right?
So not really.
Okay.
What people think is that chewing gum is entirely illegal in Singapore. It's not. It's not readily available to people that live there. I believe you still need a prescription if you would like to have chewing gum.
A prescription?
A prescription, because there are some valid uses
no,
for
there
it.
are, yeah.
But when I went to Singapore, that's what everybody says. Like, oh, you can't bring any chewing gum. And I sometimes have some in my work bag.
Right.
And I took it out just in case.
Right, just in case.
And it turns out, like, they're fine with it. Just don't throw it on the ground. Singapore is beautiful.
Yeah.
It is so clean.
Yeah.
The first time it came up that I was going to go to Singapore, because we have an office there. So that's why I've been, was for work.
Right.
The first time it came up that I might get to go there a couple of years ago, it was brought up in a team meeting, and my boss said we might need to do a thing in Singapore. Who wants to go? And I was like, oh, me. And she's like, I don't know. Singapore's pretty strict. You might create an incident.
You're a troublemaker.
We know
you.
And I was like, so here's the thing. Singapore is all about order and cleanliness.
Yes.
That is my jam.
Right. They have rules and policies.
Right. And they follow them. And it's all, they have a president. He is the son of the last president. There have only been the two of them.
Right.
But they're fairly benevolent. They really, there are 4 major racial groups. They want to make sure that there is harmony between the racial groups. There is a lot of equality, and there are a lot of laws, and there are a lot of rules. But the general feeling is we're doing this for everyone. Mm-hmm. This is the way we want a model society. Here's how we think we build it. And for the most part, they're very successful.
That's cool, though.
So Singapore is beautiful. It's clean. It's got a desired culture very firmly in mind. And it works very hard to maintain that culture in a way that includes all 4 of their cultural groups and is economically beneficial to the nation.
Wonder what that's like. Everyone living in harmony and...
Well, and it's not all harmony. You know, it's interesting to go out with folks that live in Singapore and hear them talk about what they perceive to be the problems with their government and their society and all of that. And it was just, it's so interesting to compare with, here's what I think the problems are in the American system.
Yeah.
And, you know, nobody's happy with their government is what it fucking comes down to it. You know?
That is, yeah.
But yeah, living in Singapore, my biggest problem with Singapore, I spent 3 weeks there last year, And the only thing I could think of, because it is beautiful, it is clean, like it's got good food, it's got many of the things that I want. What it doesn't ever have is a cool breeze.
I was going to say it's hot.
It is hot as fuck.
Yeah.
It is always hot. It is so hot. Oh my God, you guys, I cannot express how hot it is. So hot. So hot. And the whole time I was there, I kept thinking, like, nobody here ever sleeps with their window open and has a nice breeze come in.
Yeah.
Like, that is what I kept thinking. Like, y'all don't know what you're missing.
Right. You don't even know. It could be so nice.
It is so fucking hot here. And it's always just hot. So, according to Wikipedia, Singapore's unique combination of a strong, almost authoritarian government with an emphasis on meritocracy.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why I think there should be an extra syllable in there, but meritocracy and good governance is known as the Singapore model and is regarded as a key factor behind Singapore's political stability, economic growth, and a harmonious social order.
Cool.
It is so clean there. Also, everything is a mall in Singapore. Everything is a mall.
I sometimes feel like that here.
Oh, no. So my hotel was attached to at least 2 malls. Our office is in a conference center, but it really seemed more like a mall. Orchard Road, which is the main drag, 22 different malls along Orchard Road. Everything is a fucking mall.
Wow.
So because it is, did I mention hot as balls? Hot as balls. When I would go wandering around after I was done teaching for the night, I was mostly wandering out inside because it's so hot.
Right.
And I also can't get anywhere by myself. So I'd wander around whatever mall I had picked for that evening.
Right, right.
And I was coming up the stairs to the one that was attached to my hotel one night. And there was like a leaf on the stairs. I was like, what the hell? Who's volunteered on the job here?
There is a leaf. Someone needs to
Excuse
address
me,
this
sir,
issue.
Sir?
I'd like to file a formal complaint.
Right. Like, it was just... It's funny how you get used to it. Like, here, I don't think about that. Of course, there's a leaf. It's fall. That's how it is. And yeah, like, I'd been there for a couple of weeks at that point. I'm like, what the? There's a leaf.
We have a scandal.
Oh, my gosh. So crime rates in Singapore are among the lowest in the world. Crime affects 12.72 per 100,000 people in Singapore, and that's compared to 55.84 per 100,000 in the U.S. So that is, even with my poor math skills, almost 5 times, more than 4 times. And most of that is nonviolent crime.
Right.
And even within that nonviolent crime, most of it is e-commerce scams and e-commerce cheating.
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing. So
like, I mean, not that that's nothing. People get
right,
hurt,
but yeah, like they're not out beating people on the street.
Not a whole lot of burglaries. Not a whole lot of robberies.
No, and
no cannibals.
I don't know. I didn't look into that. But when I was in Singapore, and I travel alone usually for business, and there were certainly people there that I knew.
Right.
But I wandered all over the place. I was out at night. I was out in, some of the ethnic neighborhoods by myself. I never was worried. It just wasn't. It's very safe. It's very safe.
Yeah.
So it was notable that there was a large spike in vandalism and stolen state property crime in October of 1993. The Straits Times, which is one of the Singapore newspapers, ran stories about car vandalism in Singapore. Cars were being damaged with hot tar, paint remover, and hatchets. Taxi tires were being slashed. In the city center, cars were found with deep scratches and dents. One person took red spray paint to 6 cars in a garage off Orchard Lane, where there are 22 malls.
Right.
And the next night sprayed a line of red paint right through the official seal of a judge's car. Bad move.
Yeah. You don't get a whole jury, dude. That's the person who's going to put you in jail.
Right. So the Singapore police eventually arrested 16-year-old Andy Shu Chi Ho, and after questioning him, they also questioned several students at the Singapore American School, including Michael Fay, and charged the lot of them with more than 50 counts of vandalism.
Yikes. That can't be good. If you never punish anybody for any of that because it never happens, I just feel like it's going to be really bad when it does.
So here's the thing about Singapore. They have very harsh punishments.
Right.
And they consider that one of the reasons they have very little crime is because if you commit a crime, you're fucked.
Right.
Like, you are in trouble.
Even if you're a kid.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this guy wasn't a kid. He was 18.
Oh.
Which is interesting because, again, he is my age, and they talk about how he returns to the States in 1994 to finish high school. And I was like, motherfucker, I was done for a year. What were you doing?
Yeah.
Michael Fay pleaded guilty to vandalizing cars in addition to stealing road signs. And he was sentenced under the 1966 Vandalism Act, which was passed to curb the spread of graffiti and specifically penalizes vandalism of government property like road signs. He was sentenced on March 3rd, 1994 to 4 months in jail, a fine of 3,500 Singapore dollars, which at that time was about 2,230 US,
Okay.
and 6 strokes of the cane.
Oh.
So caning is a widely used legal form of corporal punishment in several former British colonies in Asia, including Singapore.
Okay.
There are several contexts of caning in Singapore: judicial, prison, reformatory, military, school, and domestic or private.
Okay. So pretty much everywhere,
Yes.
except like in a movie theater.
I mean, if you bring your own cane, which they do sell in the drugstores.
For caning?
Yeah, your children.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess if caning your children is like the thing to do, and it might also be how they get punished as adults, you got to get the cane from somewhere.
Right. So interestingly, when I was reading about caning, and we'll talk more about that in a second here, they were saying that this is a widely used form of punishment, not only judicially, which is what we're going to talk about, but it's used like if you're already in prison, you get in trouble, they'll cane you.
Right.
They have some laws that if you are an employee and you commit some malfeasance against the organization, your boss can cane you.
Wow.
So there are all sorts of ways that you can get caned in Singapore, but then the government's like, but don't hit your kids. That's not cool.
Okay.
But they do sell canes like in drugstores.
So what does a caning cane look like?
So,
Is it like a switch?
I don't think it's that flexible. So let me get there. There's some
Okay.
other stuff I want you to know about caning first. Of the different kinds of caning, judicial caning is the most severe, and it comes with some restrictions.
Okay.
It can only be applied to male convicts between the ages of 18 and 50 who have certified to be in a fit state of health by a medical officer.
So, I mean, that seems fair, although sexist.
Right. If the offender is under 18 years of age, he can be sentenced to up to 10 strokes of the cane, but a lighter cane will be used than that for adults. No more than 24 strokes of the cane can be sentenced in a single trial, but a convict may be sentenced to more than 24 strokes if there were multiple trials, but only 24 strokes can be administered at one time.
Okay. So I get in trouble in a bunch of different places or a bunch of different whatevers.
Right, and you have to have separate trials.
Right.
You can be
Each
sentenced.
judge can give me 24, but I can't have them all at the same day.
Right, you can't have them.
Back to
Can't
back.
just get it done.
Right.
Someone who is sentenced to death cannot be caned.
I mean, that seems fair.
Yeah.
Beat them right before you kill.
Right. The cane is made of rattan, and it cannot exceed 1.27 centimeters in diameter. That's about half an inch.
Okay.
Caning is generally administered in addition to a jail sentence and not as a punishment by itself.
Okay.
The offender is not told until the day of the caning that it's going to happen.
So it's really a mind game.
It is a mindfuck. Every caning must be attended by a medical officer and the superintendent of prisons. The caning officer has been carefully selected and trained for that job. They are generally very fit and robustly built, and they often hold high grades in the martial arts, although that is not mandatory. They are trained to use their entire body weight behind every stroke, which induces as much pain as possible.
Holy shit.
This is a long rattan stick.
Right. And you're going to swing it with all your might.
All of your might. So they are trained to swing, not just using their arms like you and I would because we're amateurs,
Right.
but with the weight of their entire body.
How does this not crush bones? Just because it's little and
Yeah, probably.
slightly
I mean,
flexible.
it's half,
and
half, but it hurts you.
I feel like it would break bones.
Right. So there was later on, when we get to the press part, they talk about how there had been a story in the 70s about somebody who got caned, and they talked about chunks of flesh were flying everywhere and the blood was flowing. It doesn't. It fucks you up. It cuts you. It hurts. There's some blood. It
There's
can
some
scar.
swelling.
Right. And there's some scarring.
Right.
Or there can be some scarring.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I know we put people to death. We put them in these little tiny rooms where they hurt each other. Like, we do lots of terrible shit, and somehow this seems so barbaric.
Well, right. And that will come into play in a little bit. So, as you can imagine, this sentencing to caning caused quite the kerfluffle in the United States.
Right.
The New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times all ran editorials and op-eds condemning the punishment. The U.S. government released a statement that it recognized Singapore's right to punish Faye within due process of the law, but that the punishment of caning was excessive for a teenager who committed a nonviolent crime. The United States Embassy in Singapore noted that the graffiti could be removed, but that caning would leave permanent scars. Even the president got involved. Bill Clinton called Faye's punishment extreme and mistaken, and pressured the Singapore government to grant Faye clemency from caning. 24 U.S. senators signed a letter to the government of Singapore appealing for clemency. The Straits Times criticized interference by the United States government and pointed out that Singaporean citizens face the same punishment as Faye.
Right.
Eventually, the Singapore government caved, and they reduced the caning from 6 strokes to 4. Faye was caned on May 5th, 1994 at Queenstown Remand Center and was released from prison in June of 1994. After his release from prison, Michael Faye returned to the U.S. to live with his father in Kettering, Ohio. Hey, Trix, if you're listening, we know where that is. And gave, so when I lived in Ohio, we lived in Centerville, which is right by Kettering.
Oh, okay.
We knew people in Kettering. After his release from prison, Michael Faye returned to the U.S. to live with his father and gave several interviews. In these interviews, he admitted to taking road signs, but denied vandalizing cars. He said that he'd pleaded guilty to that because he was told that he would be spared caning in that instance and that he was coerced into making a confession. Legal scholars have since pointed out that he would have been eligible for caning even if he were only found guilty of sign stealing.
So, right. Well, and it's probably pretty easy to say that and have most people believe you. Like, this country that beats
right, that's
you.
barbaric and beats you.
They
and
made me confess to things I didn't do.
Right. They were horrible to me.
Right.
One of the things I read, too, when I was looking at Singapore is it is one of the least corrupt countries in the world. It is very high in marks on transparency.
Right.
Like, the fact of the matter is they just punish a lot of shit by caning.
Right.
And this guy committed crimes, which in Singapore you don't do.
Right.
Everybody knows that. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Especially stupid, dumb shit just to piss people off. Like
right.
That.
Right. There is no leniency in that case. You are always made an example of.
Right.
So, the other thing that one of the articles mentioned, and even that this guy said in an interview once he got back to the States, was, you know, they talked about, like, are you scarred? Are you blah, blah, blah?
Right.
And he's like, it bled, but it wasn't like a gush. It was more like a nosebleed.
Right.
And it noted that the next day when he met with some officials, he sat down comfortably.
Right.
Like, he wasn't that hurt.
So where do they cane? Back of the legs?
The back.
Backs. Okay.
Back. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But what I also did read is that, like, he was in a psychiatric hospital before this. Like, he was very fucked up mentally over the fact that he was about to get smacked around.
Wow. And I certainly don't think I could condone the caning. However, it's one of those situations where, like, before you committed the crime, you knew what the consequences were.
And it's not like Singapore is quiet about...
Right. It wasn't a secret. You knew what you did. You knew what...
It is a strict country with strict rules. You did shit. You did shit to government property, which they take very seriously.
Right. And did you think you were just going to get away with it forever?
Because he's a little entitled American shithead.
Right.
Several months after his return to the U.S., Faye suffered burns to his hands and face after a butane incident and was subsequently admitted to Hazelden, right here in beautiful Minnesota, for butane abuse. He says he picked up that habit as a result of having been caned.
So, yeah, no. Okay.
He was real whiny about the whole thing.
I'm so torn about the caning thing because on the one hand, when you said that they punish people really severely, I was expecting a whole lot more than a little bit of prison time or a pretty small fine. Yeah. And then you get hit a couple times. Because even though that sucks, and I'm sure that there is, like, I don't think it's a good thing to do. And I'm sure that there is a big, like, emotional, like, humiliation aspect to it.
Sure.
Especially when the country, like your home country, is like, you can't do this, and it doesn't work, and you don't get out of it.
Well, it raised such a stink that now everybody knows him as the guy that was caned.
Right.
He could have just shut up, taken it,
right,
come home.
Well, but and now so I guess my thought about that is, like, you hurt for a day or two. And then
it's probably more than that. They do talk about, there can be scarring, and I'm sure that's very individual.
Right.
I scar if you look at me hard. I'd probably scar from something like that. I don't know what this guy's like.
But still, like, it's not... Getting hit 4 times would hurt.
Yeah.
It'd be humiliating.
Yeah.
But it's like 4 times.
Right.
And then it's done.
And he didn't even require medical treatment afterwards. He sat comfortably the next day.
Right.
Like...
Which doesn't make it more okay, but you can't just use that as your excuse for everything for the rest of your life.
Well, right.
Somebody hit me 4 times once.
Right. And even the other thing, like, where he was in the psychiatric hospital beforehand and, talked about, like, he started abusing substances because he was all messed up over this caning. Okay. But I don't know. When you live with somebody who is prone to smacking somebody, you live every day knowing that you could be hit at some future point and not know when.
Right.
And so the fact that this guy is so messed up over the fact that he's going to be corporally punished at some point within the next 4 months, but he doesn't know the exact day, tells me that he was a privileged kid that had never actually suffered consequences for his actions.
Right. And it would be super... So I almost feel like I'd feel more sorry for him if he came home, had a substance abuse problem, was like, because this has totally changed my life and become the one thing that I am defined by.
Right.
I am having trouble coping. Not somebody hit me 4 times once and now...
Or I knew somebody was going to hit me 4 times.
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty sure somebody's going to hit me 4 times in my life again. Like,
And you don't know which day. I don't want to make light of it.
I don't even know by whom.
But, right.
No, it's not okay. But, like, this kid was not terribly resilient.
No.
He wasn't, I don't know. I don't want to make fun of the victim, but he could have handled this in a lot better way. Right. He was a grown-up. He was over 18. He had not even graduated high school yet.
Right.
Like, this was not a kid that was, I don't know.
Yeah. He just seems very drama.
Right.
Like he likes for that to still be the thing.
Yeah. I mean, he still talks about it.
Right.
But again, also how much of that is that he's going around to everybody at work and be like, you know what I did? Got caned in Singapore.
Right.
And how much of it is that every 5 years somebody's like, wonder what happened to that kid who got caned in Singapore? And they hunt him up and he does an interview because why the hell not?
Right.
So anyway, several months after his return to the U.S., he suffered these burns after a butane incident. He was admitted to Hazelden for butane abuse. In future years, he was cited for a number of violations, mostly vehicle-related.
Right.
Arrested for possession of marijuana, which is a bullshit charge, and drug paraphernalia. I'm sorry, I can't get excited about getting busted for pot. He did confess to those crimes, but he was acquitted on a technicality.
Okay.
I'm actually okay with that. Busting people for pot's a bullshit crime. And
was that the one that he got acquitted, not the like traffic violations and all that?
The traffic violations, he didn't do any time or anything. It seemed like there were some fees and it was low level shit.
Gotcha. Not like major DUI or...
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
I don't even remember. I didn't even write it down because it was so boring. But it was... But
he was going like 25 and a 15.
Right. Yeah. A little reckless,
Right. Just a tiny bit reckless.
But yeah, no, just pretty boring stuff. But, they kept a really close eye on him.
Right.
So, since that pot bust, he has mostly stayed out of trouble, as far as anybody can tell. No criminal records found after 1998. He eventually moved to Florida to attend college. He worked as a server in Disney-related restaurants there. He was eventually promoted to supervisor and then to senior trainer. In 2005, he returned to school to complete his bachelor's in hospitality, administration, and management at the University of Central Florida. The most recent reports, which were from earlier this year, show that he's a slot operations manager at the Jack Cincinnati, which is a casino in Ohio, where he oversees 2,000 machines as well as 70 employees.
I mean, it sounds like he has turned his life around somewhat.
It is. The article I saw, let's see if I wrote it down here, was 24 years after his caning, Michael Fay has a beard and is a casino manager.
Has a beard.
He's got a good beard.
But does he have caning scars?
That I don't know. That I don't know. I don't know if he's whipping off his shirt in front of all the reporters. Right. So, I know what you're asking here. If I have to go back to work in Singapore, how likely is it that I'm going to get caned?
I am concerned. Because while I am saying all of this stuff about you're just going to get hit 4 times one time, like, I also don't want to get caned.
Right. And, you know, I'm probably not going to steal government property, but I do get lippy.
I'm totally not going to do either of those things. I don't like confrontation.
You're a much nicer human than I am.
or scared. One of those things.
It all works out. So, first of all, if you don't go to Singapore, your chances are really low.
Yeah.
Also, stay out of Malaysia and Brunei. You're pretty well good to go.
Right.
Between 2006 and 2016, which were the last 10 years for which data is available,
Yep.
there have been 32,753 canings in Singapore.
Okay, that's not terrible.
It's not terrible, and that number is a tiny bit low. About half of those years have incomplete data. They'll have data from like January to September or January to October, and at some point in the year, they're just like, "Fuck it, we're not counting anymore."
Right.
couldn't quite figure out what that was all about.
We got tired of that, and
right. That seems like a lot of numbers. We're not.
And really, who cares?
Right. And I don't want to inflate anything. Maybe they just don't cane in the off season. Right. I don't know.
That's how many canings they could process, and then they gave the judges a long holiday.
Right.
Or they gave that one poor prison superintendent a long holiday.
Right. Maybe. So I don't want to inflate any numbers, so we're going to go with this 32,753. There are about 5.6 million people living in Singapore. So that makes the average person in Singapore have a 1 in 1,713 chance of being caned in Singapore. There are about 7.442 billion people in the world right now. And I had to look this up because I remember my 7th grade history teacher, Mr. Johnson, talking about how we just reached a huge population number.
Yeah.
This would have been 1987.
Yeah.
We reached 5 billion.
Holy shit.
That's fucking crazy.
Tyler, do you hear this? We don't actually need to have extra babies just for the sake of population.
No. We're doing fine.
Right. We're good.
So, 7.442 billion people in the world right now, which means that you have an overall chance of being a human being caned in Singapore is 1 in 2,272,158.
I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah.
Especially since I don't have any travel plans to Singapore. But also, if there were 2 million people, I feel like there's a pretty good chance I'm not the one going to get caned.
Right.
I could probably keep a low profile.
Yeah.
So, also, I wonder how many of those are repeat offenders that are getting caned again. Because if you're saying that it can be a punishment for doing bad things while you're already imprisoned.
Right.
And so I'm assuming those are in that number.
No, those are separate. Those are...
okay.
Those are considered a different kind. These are just judicial canings, which are as a form of punishment. Being caned while you're incarcerated is a different category.
Still, I would be willing to bet that a lot of those are, I was caned in 1998 and then again in 2003.
Maybe. They didn't talk about the recidivism rate and all of that sort of thing. But if you have a chance to go to Singapore, you should. It's pretty fascinating. I did not have much of a desire to go to Asia, like, at all.
Right.
And I spent 3 weeks there, and like, it was great. I would go back if the chance arose. Now I'm interested in seeing more of Asia.
Yeah.
My boss at the time when I went I remember telling me he'd been to several places in Asia, and he said to me, "You're gonna like Singapore, like it's your kind of place," which it totally was. And he said, it's Asia light. Like it's it's a good introduction to Asia. It's fairly westernized. It's fairly modern.
Right.
Everything is in English because that's one of their official languages. So it's very easy to get around. And as long as you don't eat durian in the subway, you're probably not going to get into trouble. Don't eat durian in the subway.
Fair. I don't eat anything in a subway. Even here.
Sure as shit don't in Singapore.
Right. No, but even here, like, I'm just not real tempted by that. Also, I'm very rarely on a subway.
I was going to say, I was on a subway earlier this week, and I didn't eat anything, but I definitely had a Starbucks with me.
Well, I feel like that's different.
Oh, you don't bring those on the train in Singapore either.
Oh, no.
No eating, no drinking, no littering, nothing.
Nothing.
So what I was telling you when I mentioned to people that I was going to cover the caning in Singapore, what all of them said was like, oh, yeah, that kid that threw his gum on the ground.
That is exactly what I thought your story was going to be about.
Right. And that's not at all what it was. So at the time, because I remember when this happened, obviously, at the time, I think what happened is people conflated the two. So there was this caning in Singapore. There was a big kerfluffle about it. It was all over the news.
It was an American kid.
It was an American kid.
It wasn't that big of a deal, like what he did.
Well, right. But at the same time, I mean, this is when a lot of Americans, I think, really first learned anything about Singapore. And what they learned is you can't chew gum in Singapore.
Right.
And over the last 20 years, that has merged in people's minds. So that literally every single person I talked to was like, oh, yeah, that kid that threw his gum on the ground.
Right.
Not at all what happened.
Huh. So I definitely have heard and maybe even have told the gum on the ground story.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever 100% believed that that is literally what happened. Mm. But no, I definitely always thought there was a story about an American kid who got in trouble for it. How funny is that?
Yeah, no, it's not that. There is one place in Singapore that you can throw something on the ground. Uh-huh. It is the Long Bar at Raffles, the home of the Singapore Sling.
Okay.
And it's a peanut bar.
Oh, okay.
So you can throw the peanut shells on the ground. And I've been in the Long Bar. I think if you go to my LinkedIn, that is still the picture that's there, although I tried to cut out the Singapore Sling. And I do this at home too. Peanut bars, like I can't just throw shit on the floor. That's not okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, even in Singapore, I'm like, I know I should be taking advantage of this opportunity.
This is the only time it is acceptable.
Right. But like, I don't litter. Like, that's not a thing I do.
I was at the bus stop yesterday, which is like the only time I've ridden the bus home in forever. And I watched this guy. And he unwrapped his granola bar or whatever. And it was super windy and super cold. Although I hear it gets a lot colder. And he just let go of the wrapper. And it flew away. And I was like, did he have a little stroke? Like, I don't understand what you just did. There was a yelling conversation going on. Like down the street one way and then on the opposite. So like he was in between this like yelling conversation that was going on about whether the bus that was coming was the 14 or the 3. And so all eyes were turned in that direction and he just casual as can be dropped that wrapper and I just watched it flutter and I was so stunned.
Who does that?
Right. He was standing within 10 feet of 2 trash cans and he just let it go and then ate his granola bar like it was nothing.
I mean, I've definitely had something fly out of my hand and I can't chase it down because I am a fat woman who doesn't run well.
Well, or like a couple times receipts in parking lots and then they're under somebody's car and there's just no hope.
Right. Yeah, you go digging for your keys and something flies.
Really
so bad.
I've never just dropped something.
No.
And people do it out of their cars, and I think they think because no one can look at them in the eye, like that it's okay, and that makes me mad.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I've ever seen anyone do that.
And see,
this is funny crime.
This is where you're a nicer person because I would have seen them and like, what the fuck did you just do?
But here's why I did not. A, conflict. B, I was stunned.
Yeah, I suppose.
C, I try to keep a really low profile at that bus stop.
Well, all right. All legit.
Right.
All legit, but still. Oh my gosh. Ooh. Yeah. So do you want to hear how my true crime knowledge came into play during my trip to New York?
Yes.
So I went to New York this week.
She did, guys. She had such a blast.
Such a blast.
I have pictures of Diana where the joy on her face like just makes you happy from across the room.
I will. I have a website. Do you know that?
I knew that you had like several blogs. You
Oh,
said that before.
Not anymore. I have a web, dianaseacon.com. Where I post
I'm going there right now.
where I post travel stuff, but I haven't been
Gotcha.
traveling lately, so there's nothing there. So I'm gonna actually post my New York stuff. But one of the things we did, we were only there, literally there for like 48 hours, period.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we did, I went with my sister, and we went to Central Park, and I hired a pedicab, which I felt super weird about because I always think that they're like weird slavery. But they're they're motorized, so I felt better about it. He was just a tour guide because I'm looking at the pedicab, and the guy could tell that I'm thinking in my head like, I can't pay a guy to haul my fat ass around in one of those.
Right.
And he's like, they're motorized, ma'am. And I was like, oh yes, okay, let's do this.
Right.
So we took the pedicab around, and like we saw the Friends fountain, and we saw the lake, and we went to Strawberry Fields, and Lauren is of course a huge Beatles fan.
Right.
And I did not realize this, but the Dakota is directly across the street from Strawberry Fields. It's the entrance. You can see it from there.
Right.
So we saw the Imagine thing in the ground.
that thing.
And then we went across, and our tour guide pointed to the building. He said, "Do you know what that building is?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the Dakota." And he said, "Well, you know who lived there?" I'm like, "A fuck ton of people, but that's where John Lennon got murdered."
Right.
And he's like, "Right." And you know how it happened. And so I did. I'm like, so what happened was, and I went through the whole thing, and he's like, whoa, you must be really into the Beatles. I was like,
No, it's the murder part I was interested in.
I love the Beatles, but so yeah, he listened to the whole thing. He's like, I did not know a lot of that. Now I get to know that. Like now I get to use that. I'm like, yes, please do. Here are my sources.
And Diana's pulling out printed sources from her pocket. She's carrying around just in case.
It was another podcast. If you want to hear about Mark David Chapman, last podcast on the left did a 2-parter earlier this year. Oh, yeah. So much more fucked up than you think he's going to be.
Really?
Oh my God. So fucked up.
Cool.
Yeah.
You're such a crime nerd.
Oh my God. So hard.
We were at the mall today, and Diana's buying a dress. And
2 dresses.
What did she say?
2 dresses and an alpaca shirt. Thank you.
Yes, it's true. What did she actually say?
I don't know.
Do you have something? Or do you?
It was it's whatever they're it was at Torrid, and sometimes when you spend so much, they give you a coupon. So if you come back,
oh right, do you have something bucks?
Hot
bucks?
Hot buck, something like that. Yeah. And I don't hear well, which I don't know if you all know, but now you do. I don't hear well.
You've said it at least 3 times in that exact same way on the podcast. I don't know if you guys know this, but
I also don't remember shit.
It's because you're old.
But what I heard her say was, "Do you have a podcast?" I was like,
yes, I do.
I do, in fact.
Are you a fan?
With her. She's like, wait, what? I'm like, what are you asking me? Do you have hot bucks? And I'm like, no, but I have a podcast.
It was kind of amazing.
It was pretty great.
So Diana, do we have any shout outs this week?
We do.
Yay!
So first up, Crime Crazy is sponsored by M. Gillum.
Woohoo!
Also, M, you need to come visit because you're the only sponsor that one of us has not met.
This is true.
So anywho, come to visit, M. We'd love to meet you.
It's a little cold here right now. Just FYI.
Wait till the spring. It'll be
I don't
lovely.
remember where you live, but I feel like it's cold here.
Yeah, it will be soon. Elizabeth Wilder.
Woohoo!
And Dave Hatt, who gave us a great idea for some bonus content.
Woohoo!
Thanks, Dave. We always want to extend a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you'd like to support Crime Crazy, please check out our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/crimecrazypod or search for Crime Crazy Podcast. All patrons get a monthly shout out on the show, and all sponsors who support Crime Crazy through Patreon at the $10 per month level or above get a weekly shout out. Thank you.
You guys are awesome.
We love you. We also have a shout out for a new review.
Yay.
Yay.
Is this one a good one?
It is.
Okay, good. Is it a 5-star one?
It is.
Because we like those the best.
We do. So this was left by LibScoot, a lovely 5-star review.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Trish. If you'd like to receive a shout out, please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast catcher of choice. We give shout outs for all reviews.
But we like the 5-star ones the best.
Yeah, we do. You can follow Crime Crazy on Facebook. We're at facebook.com/crimecrazypod. And from there, you can catch up on the conversation in one of 2 Facebook groups. Anywho, we've got 2 groups, the public and the private. So if you don't mind everybody knowing how freaky you are, the public. If you don't want grandma seeing it, the private is for you. You can follow Crime Crazy on Twitter. We're at crimecrazypod. On Instagram at crimecrazypod. Visit our website at crimecrazypodcast.com, where Erin has been adding awesome show notes.
Woohoo! Although incomplete ones, because pretty much just mine.
I got to get on that.
Well, it helps when I'm the one that's like writing it all.
It does. It does. Or email us at crimecrazypodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us individually on Twitter. You're at
Erin Plime.
And I'm at Diana_Seacon. Or Instagram. You're at
Plime.
And I'm at Diana_Seacon.
Long pause for effect.
It's because I haven't updated my sheet, so it actually still says the same one. I had to think about it.
All right, so I think that covers that. But Diana, do you have any advice for us this week?
I do.
Okay, good. I'm ready.
Consider the source.
Yeah.
If a convicted felon in the jail cell next to you tells you that some guy has a bunch of money in a safe, like, double check on that.
Right. I mean, you already know this guy, not reliable. Like,
right.
He's doing something bad somewhere.
Probably. I mean, there are the, falsely imprisoned and that sort of thing, but...
There are. And yet,
they are in the... I would like to believe that they are in the minority.
Well...
I believe that they are.
And regardless of whether they are minority, majority, or dead even, they are not the guy in the cell next to you saying, whose house would be easy to hit.
Right. So, consider the source.
Consider the source. That's good.
Call your people.
Call your people. Just call them. Just call them.
Right now. Just say hey.
Texting works.
Whatever.
Yep. Just make sure they're
Facebook
good.
Messenger.
Yeah.
Nice Instagram private message. Got one of those today. It was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't end up on next week's episode. So you're first this week.
Yeah.
All right, then I'm putting this
Which
down
is going to be interesting. We're going to try a new thing called Winging It.
I feel like it's not.
No, it's really not. I do it a lot. Just like last week.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned at the... No.